Hey, HR friends, welcome back. We're in the 5-3 emotional 6.5 day sequence, and we're going to talk about day six. Day six is right here in this white rectangle. Now, if this is your first forecast with us, you'd want to back out of this video. Right below this video is this overview for the 5-3. Check this out. It explains how to read these graphs, and most importantly, it's going to help you keep up as we do these forecasts. All right, let's talk about day six. So, day six is definitely going to be a continuation of the challenge we talked about in day five. In day five, we had this emotional polarity flip that started to happen and it worked its way in to day six. And that's going to continue through day six. Now, halfway through day six, we're going to have a double emotional polarity flip. And all that does is it raises this another level higher, and then you're going to get that chop on top of this larger swell that it's creating. Now, when you combine first and third person together, you can see the day six, we're rolling at that level four and above that four for at least half of this sequence, 12 hours of the next 24, specifically the second 12 hours. Now, this pattern, you want to know about it because it's going to manipulate your choices through your defensive design. When this pattern elevates and holds, what it does is it convinces us to run away from our problems or stand up and make our problems worse. And we definitely don't need that right now because this is going to continue to build for the next day and a half. And then when we reverse and we go into the 5-4, there's going to be polarity flips that are going to be happening in the third person. So this is going to drop down and then the swells are going to happen here. Okay. So we definitely have some challenging times coming on us here. All right. So let's talk about testing sequence here. So we're connected to frequencies. Our choices are connected to frequencies, and those frequencies connected to the quadrants of our body. And if your choices are unbalanced, well, then the quadrants of your body are going to have accelerated damage and accelerated aging. Now, the testing structure for how much the quadrants are going to be tested in day six, there's not a whole lot of change here. You can see that from 5 to 6 in the upper left, pretty much the same. From 5 to 6 in the upper right, pretty much the same. From day 5 to day 6 in the lower left, pretty much the same thing, maybe just a small kick up in the second 12 hours. And in the right lower quadrant, you can see that it's going to actually back down a little bit compared to what we were experiencing in day five. Now, here's the thing. We talked about this. If you want to be in alignment or if you want to be synchronized with these frequencies, you have to commit to your team and not just the family you came from. Our interconnected experience is nothing but interconnected families. That's what our team is made up of. So you really got to get along with every teammate, whether you're related to them or whether they live on the other side of the world with you. And when you get along with your teammates, this is what you got to do. You got to be able to communicate and coordinate with them and help work out stress and differences. And the most important thing is you have to agree on what you're going to do together, the team objective or the team focus. And that has to be to make sure that every future team is going to have a fair and balanced reality because of what our teammates in this present moment are trying to invest in. As an individual, you want to spend time every day making sure that every family, every individual, our future world, and our future nations are going to be better off because of your choices. That's how simple this is. If your choices are going to leave a balanced world for the new members of the team, then you're in alignment with these frequencies. If your current choices are not going to leave the world a balanced place and it's going to discriminate against certain members of our team depending on where they exist, then you're going to have a problem with these frequencies. Now, if you're in alignment, that slows down aging, and that also is going to stop the progression and the accumulation of the damage that creates your diseases. Now, the most important thing is completing this objective. You see, if you can get along with all your teammates and you can actually balance your routine and you have to physically do it, you do those things and you actually pass the test. You see, space time reality is just a mental, an emotional, and a physical challenge. And you have to overcome those challenges. And if you do, there's a pretty cool reward. You get out of a negative feedback loop. You see, we're in a negative feedback loop where we learn through negative experiences. If you can overcome this feedback loop, you actually earn a privilege to exist in a positive feedback loop in your next existence. Think of it kind of like a theological heaven, where the way you learn is pleasant and things go well. That's what you're working for here. Now, that's the transition into this chart. These are the Plutonic objectives for this space-time experience. And it's this simple. There are 8 perspectives. And these 8 perspectives are looked at through first person and through third person. And what this chart does is it combines and shows how there's 64 possibilities before you would understand every possible combination of first and third person perspective. And when you do that, what it does is it creates balance at every level. So when you understand the objective of this interactive experience, and the more of these objectives that you start to master or you start to act on, the more you're going to realize what it is you have to do and why you'd want to do it. And the benefits are threefold. You get healthier, you prevent disease states, and most importantly, you graduate, you get out of this thing. All right, so let's move on here. This chart is super simple to understand. So all of these circles represent either a macro influence, or if it's a square, a micro influence. Now, there's only one micro influence on here, and it's the mental micro. Now, this is actually a 7.5 day frequency, which is larger than these other three here. So it's larger than the purple and the blue. Now, this is the largest frequency on the chart. This goes for a year. This goes for 7.5 days. This purple one, or emotional one, this is a macro. This goes for 6.5 days. And then these blue ones, these are 12 hours apiece. Okay. That's how this is set up. And we want you to know where the five strongest frequencies are. So we're going to do this a little different today. We want to empower you to be able to read this graph on your own. And this is how simple it is. So if you see this magenta circle, this just means this is where the year frequency is sitting. This isn't going to move for 2024. This will move when we get into 2025. Until then, it's staying here. Now, to read this, you look at the horizontal first, that's the space, and then the vertical is time. So it's always horizontal first. So this would be the 8-4. This is the 8-4. Now, the 8-4 is going to affect the body in two places. It's going to affect it in the first person place, and it's going to affect it in the third person place. Now, this is the capital M. There are two M's here. So if you're wondering which is the bigger one, well, it's the capital one. That's the bigger one. So that means the little m is this guy right here. The E for emotional, that's this here. This would be P1 because this is the first 12 hours, and this would be P2 because this is the second 12 hours. Okay. Now we know how to connect these two graphs together. Now, once you've done that, this is how simple it is. This is connected to a first person perspective, and that's how we look at the world from the first person perspective. And if your current routine isn't going to leave the future world a more balanced and better place, then you're going to expect to feel that in your left lower quadrant. That's how you connect this. Now, vertical, that's the third person, right? So we're going to look at this graph. The capital M is in the right lower quadrant. So if you've been having trouble in the left or right lower quadrant, and it's been going on for the entire 2024, this is the frequency that's been bothering you. So let's do the micro mental here so you get an idea of how to do this again. So the space and the time. So horizontal and vertical, that's what we're combining here. And you can see at the horizontal, this is going to be connected to family, and the vertical is connected to individual. And you have to ask yourself this question. No matter what these are, this is the question you asked. What does the future look like for the family and the individuals because of my current routines and choices? That's how you do that. Now, if you're out of balance in the first person level for this micro mental, it's going to be the small m, that's going to be the right lower quadrant. And if you're out of balance with the third person, that's this one here, the individual, that's going to affect the left lower quadrant. Now, these are moving every 7.5 days. So if all of a sudden you really start to feel your low back come on and it goes away in about a week, well, you can be pretty certain that this was influencing how you were feeling. So knowing when these are going to switch, how long they stay, and when they're going to move, very, very advantageous. Now, if we move to the emotional one, same thing here. So let's just see what this is. This is the 5-3. That's what we're in, the 5-3 emotional set. And the first person irritation, that's going to be going to, we got to find the E, the right upper quadrant. So if you're having problem with individuals, meaning your choices in your routines, how are they going to affect the futures of individuals? If it's negatively affecting them, then your health is going to be negatively affected. You have to balance your choices to balance your body. If your choices are unbalanced, your body's going to be unbalanced. You can't expect it to feel well. Now, if you're going to have problems with the other one, the father perspective, so future fathers aren't going to do well because of your choices, you're going to feel that in the upper left quadrant. All right, the last two we're going to talk about are the P1 and the P2 frequencies. These are 12 hours apiece. Now, the P1, that's the combination between the horizontal, which is the 1, and so this is a 1-5 awareness. And that's checking to see, well, what does the future have in store for the son, and what does the future have in store for the family because of your current choices? And if it's not very balanced, then you're going to expect to feel areas of your body in the areas you're not balancing the most. And in this case, the 1-5 specifically is this P1. And that's going to affect the left upper quadrant if you're out of balance with this perspective, the sun. And if you're out of perspective with the family, that's that third person up here, that's going to affect the right lower quadrant. Now, when we move on to the P2, this is a 3-4 awareness. This is how are your choices going to affect the future for fathers? How are your choices going to affect the future for mothers? In this next 24-hour period of time, there are quite a few frequencies that are testing this lower quadrant specifically. So I wouldn't be surprised if people in this next 24-hour period of time, because of this P2 and this P1, and now it's been a few days since we've had this new mental micro frequency sitting here, if they don't start to feel their lower extremity more, okay? So that's the testing structure, and understanding what you're being tested on, well, it just helps you know what's the most important thing to think about and act on when you know what the objective is that you're being tested or challenged on. That's why we do this. All right, so let's get down here and look at alignments. So alignments are going to complicate this a little bit, and I'm going to show you why. So we're concerned because we've got a lot going on down here in the lower quadrants. Well, what these are is this extra energy in the lower quadrants are creating alignments. Alignments are just when two hands on the clock align, and what they do is they create these moments in time where there's going to be a strengthened effect. And we're having a lot of strengthened effect between the oranges and the red, which makes sense because this P2 and this P1 frequency is matching up with this M and this M frequency as they're going through the clock positions. Okay, that's what's happening. I'm trying to help you see this in your mind. And what that's going to do is it's really going to amplify these tests. So what we're going to do here is we're going to talk about what the space and the time side mean first. So if you go to our live feed, there's a time bar that comes up and it's going to move through this graph. And as it's moving through these alignments, it's telling you when you're going through that amplified moment. So during that amplified moment, that's when you're going to feel a knot come on in your low back, or your digestion's really going to start to act up and you're going to get gassy, or whatever it is you're experiencing in those lower quadrants that you're not really appreciating too much. It's going to be connected to when these tests get the strongest, because it's going to show you during that time if you're unbalanced. Now, if you're balanced, that's when you're going to feel well. This is when you could actually heal your body and harness this power. But to do that, this is what you'd have to do in first person. You got to get along with everybody. Now, I'm going to say this as if it's not just the younger people that you have to get along with. It shouldn't matter if they're old or young, male or female, ethnicity, none of that stuff. You got to communicate. You got to be able to coordinate with them. You got to be able to work through stress with them. And you got to balance your routine so that future status is going to be well for every family of the future. That's what you got to do. You got to do that. If you're not doing that, then you're not doing your best with your teammates. Now, specifically, the teammate relationships that are getting tested by these blue alignments today are how we're getting along with the younger, less mature members of the team. Doesn't matter. You're still required to do the same thing. Now, getting along with a younger member is definitely different than getting along with an older member. But at the end of the day, communicate, coordinate, alleviate stress, and work together to achieve objective. That's it. Okay. So if you have problems in here, it's just telling you you need to work on how you get along with those younger teammates. Now, on this purple side, the time side, this has to do with how we're spending time. It's our routines. And if our routines aren't leading to a future state of balance, then there's going to be problems when the time bar goes through these purple ones. And today, this is testing us on our family and individual routines. So those smaller routines. And it's obvious we've been overdoing it here. We've been overdoing it here and we've been underdoing it in the green and the yellow colors. That's the world and the national views. And we can be certain of this because when we look around, our nations aren't getting along and they're not doing well. And our world is not very stable right now. And that's because we've overinvested here. So there are going to be a lot of people that are going to have exacerbations or feel their low back or have digestion problems or just not feel well in those lower quadrants when the time bar is going through these alignments today. So just pay attention to that. That's confirmation. And it would specifically be telling you that you would have to work on the younger relationships, getting along with those younger teammates, as well as balancing your routines better, maybe pulling back a little bit on how much you're doing for your individual self and your family, and understanding that that has to be in balance with what you're doing at the national and the world level. All right. So that's enough about alignments. That's pretty busy as well today. Down here, we're just going to show you. You can go ahead. We just did 6. This is 6.5. So this is what the end of the sequence looks like. You've got the entire week here to reference. The beginning parts of the day is not so necessary. Same thing down here. You can see that we've got all the charts as far as alignments go. We can fast forward here. This is the only day worth of alignments you haven't seen. This is what's coming in 6.5. So here's the exclamation point. That's just a preview of what's coming in the next forecast. And then down here, we've got the rest of 2024. We want you to be prepared for the rest of 2024. This is the electromagnetic pattern. We're going to show you when it elevates, when those dates are coming. We don't want you being manipulated by this pattern. It's what's creating your stress. It's what's causing all the complications in your life. And the more people that overcome this pattern, the better it's going to be for both the individual and the communities those individuals exist within. Health Reconnected is here to really help at the larger level. And to do that, we need as many individuals committed to overcoming this pattern. That's what we're here to help you do. All right, we'll see you in the next 24.